my child, stop what you're doing, pause your thoughts, quiet your heart, and listen now. This moment is not sluchakri, and this word is not late. What you are about to hear explains the ache, the silence, the delays, and the strength you didn't know you were building. This is why you've been waiting, not because you were forgotten, but because something sacred was unfolding in you. Time-sensitive clarity is being released now. Lean in. What is revealed here will realign your understanding of the past and prepare you for what is opening before you. Listen before you scroll, before you sigh, before you assume this is just another moment passing by. Listen. I have watched you wait in places where hope felt thin and answers felt far away, and I want you to know this first truth before anything else settles in your heart. Your waiting has never been invisible to me. You were not overlooked. You were not forgotten. You were not delayed by accident. I saw you when you whispered prayers you were afraid to say out loud. I saw you when you smiled for others but cried when you were alone. I saw you when time kept moving forward but your life felt paused, suspended between what was promised and what was happening. You thought the waiting meant I was silent, distant, or unmoved, but even when you could not feel me, I was closer than your breath. I was present in every unanswered question, every restless night, every moment you wondered if you had misunderstood me. You waited because you trusted me enough to stay, even when leaving would have been easier. You waited because somewhere deep within you, you believed I had not finished. That belief, fragile, trembling, yet persistent, is what kept you standing when discouragement tried to pull you down. You may not have understood the reason for the waiting, but I did. I knew the weight you were carrying before you ever felt it press against your chest. I knew the timing of your tears before they fell. I knew how many times you would ask, "Why not now?" and how many times you would question whether you were doing something wrong. And still, I stayed with you. I did not rush you through the waiting because rushing would have cost you something sacred. I let the days stretch because something eternal was being formed inside you. You see waiting as empty space, but I see it as holy ground. It is where faith stops being a concept and becomes a lifeline. It is where you learn that I am not only the God of answers, but the God who sustains you when answers do not come quickly. You waited in rooms no one applauded. You waited in seasons that felt unfair. You waited while others seemed to move ahead effortlessly. And each time comparison whispered that you were behind, I was teaching you endurance. Each time doubt told you I had changed my mind, I was anchoring you deeper into trust. You did not wait because you were weak, you waited because you were being strengthened. You did not wait because you lacked favor, you waited because favor was being protected. I needed you to learn how to stand without constant reassurance, how to trust my heart even when my hand felt still. This was not about teaching you patience alone. It was about teaching you intimacy. I wanted you to know me, not just what I can give you. I saw you grow in ways you still do not recognize yet. I saw pride soften into humility, fear transform into discernment, and desperation mature into quiet confidence. You think the waiting only took things from you, but it also gave you something invaluable, a deeper awareness of my presence. You learned how to listen, how to endure, how to remain faithful without applause. You learned how to hope without timelines. That is not small. That is not wasted. That is sacred preparation. And as we keep going, I want you to stay with me in this truth. The waiting was not the absence of my work, it was the evidence of it. Do not mistake the slow seasons for rejection. This is where I was shaping you most deliberately. You assumed the waiting meant you had failed, that you had disappointed me, that something was wrong with you. But hear me clearly now. I was not withholding because you were unworthy. I was preparing because you were chosen. Punishment breaks a person down without purpose, but preparation builds a person up with intention. What you experienced was not correction driven by anger, but construction driven by love. Every delay was measured. Every pause was intentional. I was not standing against you, I was standing over you, guarding what was being formed so it would not collapse under its own weight later. You wanted the outcome, but I wanted the foundation. You asked for answers, but I was developing endurance. You prayed for movement, but I was strengthening stability. There are things you asked me for that required more than desire, they required capacity. Capacity is not given in a moment. It is grown over time. And time is the classroom where preparation does its deepest work. You could not see it, but while nothing around you seemed to change, everything within you was being rearranged. Old mindsets were being dismantled. Shallow confidence was being replaced with quiet certainty. Impatience was being exchanged for discernment. You thought you were standing still, but you were actually being trained. Preparation often feels unfair because it does not announce itself. It does not come with applause or visible progress. It comes disguised as delay, frustration, and repetition. It feels like being overlooked when, in truth, you are being set apart. If I had rushed you past the season, you might have arrived sooner, but you would not have endured longer. I was not interested in giving you something quickly if it meant losing you later. I was preparing you to last. That is why I allowed the wait to linger just long enough to strengthen you, but never long enough to destroy you. I measured the pressure. I watched your limits. I intervened more times than you realize. You needed to learn how to carry responsibility without letting it define your worth. You needed to learn how to wait without losing your identity. You needed to learn how to trust me when there was no evidence to point to, because what is coming will sometimes require that same trust. Preparation teaches you to rely on who I am, not on what is happening. It teaches you to remain steady when circumstances are unstable. It teaches you how to hold promises without squeezing them to death with anxiety. You are being prepared not just to receive, but to steward, to hold, to protect, to grow what will be placed in your hands. I know you questioned yourself in the waiting. I know you replayed conversations, decisions, and prayers, wondering if one wrong step caused everything to stall. But hear this: preparation is not about perfection. It is about positioning. And you stayed positioned. You did not walk away when it hurt. You did not harden your heart when it would have been easier. You remained open, even when disappointment tried to close you off. That openness is part of your preparation. That tenderness is strength, not weakness. And as we continue, I want you to carry this truth forward with you. The waiting did not delay your destiny, it equipped you for it. What you prayed for could not coexist with who you used to be, and that is why the waiting reshaped you. You thought you were asking me for a situation, a breakthrough, a door to open, but you were also unknowingly asking me to transform you. The future you longed for required a version of you that could stand upright under pressure, remain humble under favor, and stay anchored when circumstances shift. I could not give you what you asked for without first changing how you would carry it. Not because you were insufficient, but because growth always precedes increase. You asked me to trust you with more, and my answer was to make you more. There were habits that needed to loosen their grip. There were expectations that needed to be refined. There were attachments that would have drained you if I had let them follow you into the next season. You did not lose those things because I was subtracting from you. You lost them because they could not travel where you are going. The waiting was where those separations happened gently instead of catastrophically. I was protecting you from learning painful lessons the hard way. I was allowing time to do what force would have broken. Transformation that lasts rarely happens overnight, it happens through sustained surrender. You asked for strength, and I allowed situations that required it. You asked for wisdom, and I allowed confusion that pushed you to seek me instead of shortcuts. You asked for peace, and I allowed you to confront what was disturbing your soul so it could no longer hide beneath distraction. This is how change works. It is not always comfortable, but it is always purposeful. I was not trying to make you someone else. I was uncovering who you were always meant to be. The version of you that can walk into what is next is not louder or harder, it is deeper, steadier, and more discerning. You may not recognize yourself fully yet, but you are not who you were when you first started waiting. You respond differently now. You pause before reacting. You listen more closely. You question less frantically. That is not coincidence, that is formation. The waiting taught you how to stand without constant validation. It taught you how to sit with uncertainty without panicking. It taught you how to trust my character when my timing confused you. These are not small changes. They are the exact changes required for what you asked me to do in your life. If I had answered you sooner, you might have received the blessing, but you would have wrestled with it instead of walking in it. You would have doubted yourself under its weight. You would have feared losing it because you had not yet learned how to rest in me. I needed you to become someone who could receive without anxiety, succeed without losing compassion, and advance without forgetting where your strength comes from. That is why the waiting stayed as long as it did. It was not about delaying the promise, it was about aligning you with it. And now, as you stand here, changed in ways you once resisted but now carry naturally, you are closer than you realize to understanding why everything unfolded exactly as it did. Pause for a moment and let this truth settle. What you begged me for once would have crushed you if it had arrived too soon. I know that is difficult to hear, because you believed you were ready. You felt strong enough, desperate enough, faithful enough. But readiness is not measured by desire. It is measured by durability. You saw the promise as relief, but I saw the responsibility attached to it. You saw the breakthrough as freedom, but I saw the pressure it would bring, the expectations it would attract, the weight it would place on your soul. If I had handed it to you earlier, it would not have healed you, it would have exposed every fragile place still forming within you. And I love you too much to let the very thing you prayed for become the thing that breaks you. You were still learning how to stand without approval, how to breathe without reassurance, how to trust without guarantees. You were still tying your worth to outcomes, still measuring your value by progress, still letting fear speak louder than wisdom. What you wanted required you to be anchored, not anxious. It required you to be steady, not reactive. It required you to know who you are even when everything around you shifts. That kind of stability is not rushed, it is forged. I delayed not because you were weak, but because you were becoming strong, and strength that lasts must be tested before it is entrusted with more. Think of how close you came to burning out even in the waiting. Think of how overwhelmed you felt when responsibilities piled up without the reward you expected. If the promise had arrived then, it would have demanded more than you could sustainably give. You would have overextended yourself, trying to prove you deserved it. You would have silenced your own needs to meet everyone else's expectations. You would have confused momentum with purpose and exhaustion with faithfulness. I did not want you surviving the promise, I wanted you thriving in it. So I protected you from premature success, from early exposure, from carrying a future weight with an unprepared heart. There were lessons you needed to learn gently rather than through collapse. Lessons about rest. Lessons about boundaries. Lessons about letting go of control. I allowed you to experience small disappointments so you would not be destroyed by large ones later. I allowed you to feel limited so you would learn how to lean. I allowed you to wait so you would stop rushing yourself into roles you were not yet shaped to hold. This was not about withholding goodness, it was about guarding wholeness. You cannot pour from a cracked vessel without losing yourself, and I refuse to let that be your story. You may look back now and feel embarrassed by how badly you wanted it then, how certain you were that timing was the only obstacle. But there is no shame in that. You were growing. You were honest. You were reaching. And growth often includes realizing that what you thought you could handle would have handled you instead. I did not say no to you. I said not yet. And not yet was not rejection, it was rescue. As we move forward, I want you to understand this deeply. Every delay was an act of protection, and every closed moment spared you from a breaking you did not yet have the strength to survive. While you were focused on what was missing, I was quietly reinforcing what mattered most, your inner strength. You looked for evidence in visible progress, open doors, answered prayers that others could celebrate. But my most important work in you was happening far from applause, far from confirmation, far from anyone else's awareness. I was building resilience in the places you once avoided, reinforcing faith where doubt had made itself comfortable, and teaching you how to stand upright even when no one was watching. This kind of strengthening does not announce itself. It happens in silence, in repetition, in moments that feel ordinary but are anything but. You thought nothing was changing because nothing external moved, yet inside you, foundations were being laid. I was training your thoughts to slow down, your reactions to soften, your heart to remain open even after disappointment. I was teaching you how to endure without becoming bitter, how to hope without demanding, how to trust without control. These are muscles you cannot build in moments of ease. They are strengthened in hidden places, late nights, quiet prayers, unanswered questions, steady obedience when motivation fades. You did not see the progress because it was internal, but internal strength is what determines whether external blessings last. There were moments you felt weak, moments you felt unsure, moments you questioned whether you were regressing instead of growing. But growth does not always feel empowering, it often feels uncomfortable. When a muscle is being strengthened, it resists, it strains, it aches. That ache you felt was not failure, it was formation. I was increasing your capacity to carry weight without collapsing, to hold responsibility without losing joy, to walk forward without needing constant affirmation. I was fortifying your inner world so that when the outer world begins to shift, you would not be shaken by every change. You learned how to be alone without being lonely. You learned how to sit in silence without panicking. You learned how to wait without filling the space with noise or distraction. These are not small victories, they are signs of maturity. You stopped running from discomfort and started listening to what it was teaching you. You stopped numbing your questions and started bringing them to me. That is strength. Quiet strength. Enduring strength. The kind of strength that does not demand recognition but reveals itself when pressure comes. Others may not see this version of you yet, but you will. You will notice it in how you respond differently, how you pause before reacting, how you no longer crumble at delays that once devastated you. You will notice it in how you trust more deeply and fear less intensely. That did not happen by accident. It happened because I was strengthening you in hidden places where roots grow deep before branches reach high. And as we continue, remember this: what is built in secret is what sustains you in the open. Do not confuse my quiet with distance. Some of my deepest work happens when my voice lowers, not when it shouts. You interpreted the silence as abandonment, as if my nearness depended on constant signs, constant reassurance, constant movement. But silence is not the space where I leave you. It is the space where I draw you closer. When everything is loud, you listen for answers. When everything becomes quiet, you learn to listen for me. I was not withholding my presence. I was inviting you into a different depth of relationship, one that does not depend on constant proof but rests in trust. You were used to hearing me through outcomes, through doors opening and prayers answered quickly. So when those things slowed down, you thought I had stepped back. But I was actually asking you to step in. I wanted you to know me beyond results, beyond timing, beyond the visible markers you once relied on. Silence strips away performance. It removes the illusion that faith is sustained by activity alone. In the quiet, there is nowhere to hide, only a place to be honest. And honesty is where intimacy begins. You brought me your questions in the silence. You brought me your frustrations. You brought me the parts of yourself you usually masked with strength or certainty. That mattered more than answers. You were learning to sit with me, not just seek from me. You were learning to stay when nothing felt rewarding. That is not distance, that is devotion. Silence creates room for transformation because it slows you down enough to notice what you usually outrun. In those quiet moments, I showed you things about yourself you would have missed if life had stayed noisy. You discovered that my presence does not depend on how clearly you feel me in every moment. You learned that faith is not fragile just because emotions fluctuate. You learned that I am steady even when your thoughts are not. This is intimacy, the kind that is not shaken by unanswered questions or delayed outcomes. The kind that remains when the excitement fades and only trust is left. I was teaching you how to stay connected without needing constant confirmation, because the season ahead will sometimes require that same steadiness. Silence also taught you discernment. When everything quieted, you began to recognize the difference between your own fears and my guidance. You learned when to wait and when to move. You learn that not every urge is instruction and not every delay is denial. That clarity is born in stillness. I allowed the noise to fade so you could hear what truly matters. Not the rush, not the pressure, not the expectations, but the gentle, steady direction that leads you forward without panic. You may still struggle with silence at times, but now you know it is not empty. It is full of reflection, full of growth, full of connection that does not need words to survive. And as we move forward, remember this: intimacy deepens not when I speak louder, but when you learn to trust me even when I speak softly. Feelings change quickly, but faith is what carries you when emotions cannot. This is why I asked you to walk without leaning on how things felt. You wanted reassurance through comfort, clarity through emotion, certainty through peace that never wavered. But feelings are unstable teachers. They rise and fall with circumstances, with energy, with expectation. If you had learned to rely on them, you would have been pulled off course every time they shifted. So I taught you something deeper, something steadier: to walk by faith, not by feeling. There were days you felt strong, and days you felt unsure. Days you felt hopeful, and days you felt tired of hoping. And in all of them, I remained the same. That contrast mattered. I wanted you to see that your faith does not disappear just because your emotions do. Trust is not measured by how inspired you feel, it is measured by whether you continue to move forward even when inspiration fades. You learned how to obey without enthusiasm, how to believe without excitement, how to remain faithful without constant emotional reward. That is maturity. You began to recognize that feelings are information, not instruction. They tell you what is happening inside you, but they do not get to decide what you do next. Fear may show up, but it does not get the final word. Doubt may whisper, but it does not get to lead. I was teaching you to anchor your decisions in truth rather than reaction. This is what makes faith resilient. This is what allows you to keep walking even when the path feels unclear. Walking by faith does not mean ignoring your emotions, it means not being ruled by them. You learned how to acknowledge disappointment without letting it define you. You learned how to feel uncertainty without surrendering to it. You learned how to wait without losing hope just because waiting felt uncomfortable. These lessons will protect you in seasons where clarity comes slowly and pressure comes quickly. They will keep you grounded when emotions surge and expectations collide. If I had allowed you to depend on feeling ready, you would have waited forever. If I had required constant emotional peace before progress, you would have stalled at every challenge. Faith moves when feelings hesitate. Faith trusts when feelings question. Faith remains when feelings waver. That is what you were learning, step by step, even when you did not realize it. You were building spiritual endurance, the ability to continue without needing everything to feel right. Now you know that my guidance is not always accompanied by strong emotion. Sometimes it comes as quiet confidence. Sometimes it comes as steady persistence. Sometimes it comes as choosing to keep going even when motivation is low. That is not weakness, that is strength refined. And as this journey continues, remember this: what you feel will change, but what you trust will sustain you. Look back carefully, you were never being stalled, you were being positioned. While you were watching the clock, I was watching connections. While you wondered why progress felt slow, I was protecting you from partnerships that would have drained you, distracted you, or quietly redirected you away from your purpose. You wanted movement. I wanted alignment. Because what you are carrying cannot be sustained by just anyone walking beside you. A waiting created distance from relationships that felt comfortable but were not compatible with where you are going. It also created space for the right people to arrive at the right time, not a moment too early and not a moment too late. You could not have seen this while you were in it. Delays feel only because they strip away crowds. They reduce noise. They thin the circle. And that is intentional. I needed you to learn the difference between being surrounded and being supported. Some people were meant to walk with you for a season, not a lifetime. If I had rushed you forward, you would have carried voices into the future that belonged to your past. You would have accepted counsel that was not aligned with your calling. You would have confused familiarity with faithfulness. So I slowed things down and let time reveal who could walk at your pace without pulling you off course. You may remember moments when certain relationships faded without dramatic conflict, when conversations slowly lost depth, when you realized you were growing but others were staying the same. That was not betrayal, that was alignment at work. I was gently removing what could not grow with you. At the same time, I was preparing others, people whose timing needed to intersect with yours after you had learned discernment, after you had learned patience, after you had learned how to stand on your own without leaning too heavily on anyone else. I did not want you dependent. I wanted you discerning. The right people do not rush you, clutter you, or confuse you. They confirm, not compete. They strengthen, not drain. But you could not recognize them clearly until the waiting sharpened your awareness. Waiting teaches you to listen. It teaches you to observe patterns instead of reacting to moments. It teaches you to value depth over excitement. Without that season, you might have chosen speed over substance, connection over alignment. I was protecting you from that mistake. Even now, some of the people meant to walk with you next are already moving closer, though you may not see them yet. Timing is doing its quiet work. Conversations will begin naturally. Opportunities will feel steady instead of rushed. Support will feel safe instead of conditional. This is not coincidence, it is coordination. And as we move forward, understand this clearly. The delay was not about keeping you alone. It was about ensuring you are not surrounded by the wrong voices when the doors begin to open. Some of the hardest moments you endured were not losses, they were rescues disguised as disappointment. When doors closed abruptly, when opportunities slipped away, when plans fell apart despite your effort and prayer, you assumed something had gone wrong. But those closed doors were answers, even if they did not look like the answers you wanted. You were asking me to guide you, and guidance sometimes means obstruction. Not every open door leads forward. Some lead sideways, backward, or into cycles you would struggle to escape. I closed what would have cost you clarity, peace, or integrity later. You saw potential. I saw consequences. You saw immediate relief. I saw long-term erosion. Some paths looked promising but would have slowly disconnected you from who you are becoming. Others would have demanded compromise disguised as flexibility. If I had allowed you through every door you knocked on, you would have been busy but misaligned, productive but restless, successful but disconnected. I refused to let progress come at the expense of your soul. So I intervene. Quietly, firmly, repeatedly. Closed doors feel personal because they challenge your expectations. They make you question your judgment. They tempt you to replay decisions and doubt your discernment. But those moments were not evidence that you were wrong. They were evidence that you were being guided. Redirection is not rejection. Sometimes it is the clearest form of care. I was teaching you to trust my no as much as you trust my yes, because both are rooted in the same intention, to lead you well. There were paths you would have entered too eagerly, staying longer than you should have because you mistook access for assignment. I closed those doors early so you would not need dramatic exits later. I spared you prolonged confusion by allowing brief disappointment. I spared you burnout by interrupting momentum. At times, I even let things collapse suddenly so you would not keep investing in what was never meant to sustain you. That was not cruelty, that was clarity arriving in a form you could not ignore. Each closed door refined your discernment. You began to ask better questions. You stopped chasing every opportunity and started waiting for alignment. You learned that not everything good is good for you. You learned that peace is a signal, not an afterthought. These lessons will matter deeply in the season ahead, where options may multiply and decisions will require wisdom more than urgency. Remember this as we continue forward together. What I closed protected your future, and what I am opening next will make sense only because those doors remain shut. Pay attention to this: opposition did not rise against you by accident. It rose because something within you matters. Persistence is not random friction. It is reaction. You wondered why things felt harder than they should. why progress seemed contested, why even small steps required so much effort. But what you faced was not evidence of misdirection, it was confirmation of significance. Ease is rarely challenged. Purposes. When you move without impact, nothing pushes back. When you carry something that can alter environments, awaken others, or shift patterns, resistance takes notice. That is what you encountered. You felt it as discouragement at first, voices questioning your readiness, circumstances stretching you thin, moments when momentum slowed just as confidence grew. You assumed the resistance meant you were doing something wrong. But resistance often appears when you are doing something right, something aligned, something worth opposing. If there were nothing of value ahead, nothing would try to stop you. The pressure you felt was not meant to crush you. It was meant to reveal what you carry and teach you how to carry it without losing yourself. You were learning how to move forward without needing approval, how to continue when affirmation was scarce, how to stay steady when doubt circled loudly. Resistance exposes weak motivations quickly. It forces clarity. It demands commitment. Many people turn back at resistance because they mistake difficulty for denial. You did not. You questioned, yes, but you stayed. You adjusted without abandoning the path. That endurance is not accidental. It is evidence of calling. You stayed because something, and you knew there was more on the other side of the pushback. Resistance also refined your discernment. You learned which battles were worth engaging and which distractions were meant to drain your energy. You learned that not every challenge deserves your response, and not every obstacle requires force. Some require patience. Some require rest. Some require quiet persistence. You learned how to guard your focus, how to protect your peace, how to move without announcing every step. That wisdom came because resistance taught you where to stand and where to let go. If everything had been easy, you might have mistaken speed for substance. You might have equated popularity with purpose. You might have relied on momentum instead of conviction. Resistance slowed you just enough to deepen you. It forced you to check your motives, refine your intentions, and strengthen your resolve. It asked you whether you believed in what you were becoming even when the journey felt costly. And you answered not always with words, but with perseverance. Understand this as we move forward. Resistance is not a sign to retreat. It is a signal to remain rooted. It reveals where growth is happening. It exposes where strength is being formed. You carry something that demands responsibility, and responsibility always attracts opposition before it attracts recognition. The resistance you faced did not defeat you, it shaped you. And because you learned how to stand under pressure, you will recognize when the pressure shifts from opposing you to preparing the way ahead. Before anything in your life could rise, something within you had to go deeper, and that is what this season accomplished. Elevation without roots is dangerous. It looks impressive for a moment, but it cannot withstand wind, weight, or time. I was never interested in lifting you quickly if it meant watching you fall later. So while you were looking upward, waiting for visible progress, I was working downward, strengthening your inner stability, anchoring your identity, deepening your trust. Roots are formed underground, unseen, uncelebrated, yet absolutely essential. That is where your growth was happening. You wanted movement. I wanted depth. You wanted expansion. I wanted stability. You wanted recognition. I wanted resilience. Rooting requires stillness. It requires patience. It requires remaining planted even when nothing above the surface appears to be changing. That was uncomfortable for you because stillness can feel like stagnation. But there is a difference between being stuck and being rooted. One drains life. The other stores it. You were storing strength for a future that will require it. While you stayed planted, you learned who you are without constant affirmation. You learned what you believe without needing agreement. You learned how to hold peace without perfect conditions. These are roots. They do not form when life is moving quickly. They form when you stay present, faithful, and grounded through uncertainty. You learned how to remain yourself even when circumstances tried to redefine you. That grounding will matter when attention increases and expectations grow. Rooting also protected you from comparison. When your focus was turned inward and downward, you stopped measuring your progress against others. You learned to trust your own pace. You learned that growth does not need to be loud to be real. That shift preserved your joy. It prevented bitterness. It kept you aligned with your own journey instead of chasing someone else's timeline. Roots keep you steady when others accelerate around you. Elevation attracts weight, responsibility, influence, visibility, expectation. Without roots, that weight becomes overwhelming. With roots, it becomes manageable. You were being prepared to carry more without losing balance, to stand taller without becoming rigid, to grow wider without becoming scattered. Rooting teaches you flexibility and strength at the same time. It allows you to bend without breaking, to receive without being consumed, to advance without forgetting where you came from. As we continue forward, remember this: what grows deep can grow high. What is anchored can be lifted. What is rooted can endure seasons of abundance as well as seasons of strain. You were not delayed, you were grounded. And that grounding is the reason what comes next will not destabilize you. Hear this carefully: power without patience would have undone you, even if it impressed others. You wanted influence, movement, authority, the ability to make things happen and see results quickly. But power amplifies whatever already exists inside you. If impatience leads, power accelerates damage. If insecurity lingers, power magnifies it. So before I entrusted you with greater impact, I needed you to learn how to wait without resentment, how to move without rushing, how to breathe without control. Patience is not delay, it is discipline. And discipline is what makes power safe. You thought patience meant passivity, but patience is active restraint. It is the strength to pause when you could push, the wisdom to listen when you could react, the courage to trust timing when urgency screams. You were learning how to sit with discomfort without forcing outcomes. You were learning how to resist shortcuts that look efficient but would have cost you depth. These lessons were not meant to slow you forever, they were meant to shape how you move once momentum arrives. Power demands emotional regulation. It requires discernment under pressure. It requires the ability to carry responsibility without becoming rigid or reactive. Impatience seeks control. Patience cultivates trust. I needed you to trust more deeply, not just me, but the process unfolding within you. Every moment you waited without quitting strengthened your capacity to hold influence without being consumed by it. You were learning that not every opportunity needs immediate action, and not every delay needs explanation. That understanding will protect you when decisions carry greater weight. You also learned how to respond rather than react. Reaction is fast but shallow. Response is measured and intentional. Power responds. It does not panic. It does not prove itself. It does not rush to be seen. That calm strength was being formed in you each time you chose restraint over impulse. Each time you waited instead of forcing. Each time you trusted instead of manipulating circumstances. You were building an inner authority that does not depend on volume or urgency. Patience also taught you humility. You learned that growth does not always announce itself. You learned to value unseen progress. You learned that being ready is not about being eager, it is about being grounded. These lessons stripped away entitlement and replaced it with stewardship. You stopped asking, "When will it happen for me?" and started asking, "How can I be faithful where I am?" That shift matters. It changes how power is used once it is given. If I had given you influence before patience, you might have exhausted yourself trying to sustain it. You might have measured success by speed instead of substance. You might have burned bridges while trying to build momentum. I spared you that. I allowed patience to mature you so that when power begins to flow through your life, it will not overwhelm you or distort you. It will serve others rather than consume you. And as we move forward, understand this. Patience was not keeping power from you, it was preparing you to wield it wisely. Do not underestimate what endurance has given you: authority that cannot be imitated or rushed. Anyone can speak confidently when life has been kind. Anyone can appear strong when the path has been smooth. But authority is forged in consistency under pressure, in faithfulness without reward, in staying aligned when quitting would have been easier. The waiting you endured gave you credibility that ease never produces. It shaped the quiet confidence that does not need to announce itself because it knows where it came from. You earned this authority through perseverance, through showing up when motivation was low, through choosing integrity when shortcuts tempted you, through staying steady when others drifted away. Authority is not volume, it is weight. And weight comes from experience, not theory. You carry a depth now that cannot be explained, only recognized. People will sense it in how you speak, how you listen, how you move. Not because you are louder, but because you are grounded. The easy path offers speed, but it does not offer substance. It gives results without resilience. It creates confidence without character. That kind of success collapses when challenged. Your waiting, however, trained you to stand without applause. It taught you how to remain faithful without immediate feedback. That endurance became your authority. You learned how to keep going without needing validation. That is rare. It is powerful. That is what makes your presence steady even when circumstances are not. You also learned how to carry wisdom without arrogance. Because you waited, you know what it feels like to need patience. You know what it feels like to trust timing you do not control. That empathy will shape how you lead, how you guide, how you support others. Authority rooted in waiting is compassionate, not domineering. It listens. It discerns. It does not rush people where they are not ready to go. You were being shaped into someone whose influence heals rather than pressures. There were moments you wanted the easy path, moments you questioned whether perseverance was worth it. But if you had taken shortcuts, you would have arrived sooner and stayed less. You would have lacked the internal framework required to sustain growth. The waiting built layers of understanding that shortcuts strip away. It gave you perspective. It taught you timing. It trained you to recognize when to move and when to remain still. That discernment is authority in action. Soon, others will look to you for guidance not because you claim expertise, but because your steadiness will speak for itself. They will sense that you have been tested, that you have waited, that you have endured without becoming hardened. That combination is rare. That combination commands respect without demanding it. And as this journey continues, remember this truth. The authority you now carry was earned quietly, patiently, faithfully, and it will sustain you far longer than anything gained easily ever could. There came a moment when you realized results could no longer carry you, and that moment changed everything. You had reached the edge of what motivation, planning, and expectation could sustain. Outcomes had become unreliable companions. Sometimes they showed up, sometimes they disappeared without explanation. And when they failed to arrive, you were left face to face with a deeper question. Would you still trust me if nothing changed yet? That was the turning point. Not because you stopped wanting progress, but because you stopped needing it to survive. You learned how to lean without guarantees, how to stand without visible reward, how to remain faithful without immediate confirmation. That shift was not small, it was transformational. Before this season, you leaned heavily on outcomes to reassure you that you were doing the right thing. You measured peace by progress and confidence by results. When things moved forward, you felt aligned. When they stalled, you felt lost. But outcomes are unstable foundations. They fluctuate. They rise and fall. If you build your identity on them, you rise and fall with them too. I needed to teach you something more stable, how to anchor yourself in relationship rather than results. That is why the waiting lingered. That is why answers did not come quickly. I was inviting you to lean on presence instead of proof. Leaning on me required surrendering control. It meant releasing the need to constantly evaluate whether things were working. It meant trusting that faithfulness has value even when it produces no immediate reward. That was uncomfortable at first. You wanted signs. You wanted timelines. You wanted reassurance that your effort was not wasted. But slowly, something shifted. You learned how to rest in the process itself. You learned how to show up because it mattered, not because it paid off right away. That kind of faith changes how you move through life. When you stopped leaning on outcomes, you stopped being crushed by disappointment. You stopped panicking at delays. You stopped forcing doors that required peace to open. You learned how to breathe even when uncertainty lingered. My calm did not come from certainty, it came from trust. You discovered that I am steady even when circumstances are not. That realization gave you a resilience outcomes never could. It allowed you to continue without burning out, to hope without obsessing, to move forward without demanding immediate evidence. This lesson prepared you for what is ahead. The next season will bring movement, but not everything will unfold perfectly or predictably. If you had not learned how to lean on me instead of outcomes, you would have been shaken by every unexpected turn. Now, you are anchored. You know that progress does not validate you and delay does not diminish you. You know that obedience has worth even when results lag behind. That understanding will keep you steady when expectations rise and responsibilities expand. Leaning on me also freed you from comparison. When outcomes no longer defined your worth, other people's progress stopped threatening your peace. You became more present, more grounded, more patient. That inner stability is not accidental, it is the result of this season. And as we continue, remember this: outcomes will come and go, but the trust you built here will sustain you through every season that follows. What confused you on the surface was coordinated beneath it all, timing beyond what your eyes could track. You were watching days, weeks, and years, wondering why nothing seemed to align when you were finally ready. But readiness on earth does not always match readiness beyond it. There were factors you could not see, connections still forming, conditions still shifting, and moments still approaching their fullness. You judged timing by immediacy, I measured it by alignment. And alignment requires patience, precision, and perspective far wider than the moment you are standing in. You experienced frustration because you were only seeing your part of the story. You could not see how your waiting intersected with others' growth, others' decisions, others' readiness. You could not see how one delay protected another process, or how one closed door prevented a collision you were never meant to endure. Timing is not isolated and is layered. It involves more than you, more than now, more than what feels urgent. I was synchronizing what Earth could not yet comprehend. There were moments you tried to force alignment because you believed readiness meant it was time. But readiness is not only about you being prepared, it is about the environment being ready to receive you. If I had moved you sooner, you would have arrived before the ground was stable. You would have carried vision into spaces not yet prepared to hold it. That would have required you to fight battles you were not meant to fight. I delayed not because you were behind, but because something ahead needed time to settle. Heavenly timing often feels slow because it considers impact, not just intention. It accounts for sustainability, not just arrival. I was not interested in giving you a moment, I was preparing a season. Seasons require alignment of multiple elements, and those elements do not always move at the same pace. While you waited, other pieces were shifting quietly. Conversations were happening you knew nothing about. Circumstances were rearranging in ways you could not influence. Opportunities were forming beyond your line of sight. This was not inactivity, it was orchestration. The waiting also adjusted your expectations. You learned not to demand immediate fulfillment. You learned to trust timing you could not control. That patience will matter deeply when movement accelerates. Because when timing finally converges, things will unfold quickly, and you will need the steadiness this season gave you. Without it, you would feel overwhelmed by the very momentum you once prayed for. Earth often interprets delay as failure. Heaven interprets delay as precision. What felt late to you was right on time in a larger design. You are stepping into alignment now, not because you waited long enough, but because everything else finally caught up. And as this continues, remember this truth: timing was never working against you, it was working for you in ways you could not yet see. There is a quiet danger you did not see: success arriving before support, and I refused to let you carry weight meant to be shared. You thought the delay was about readiness, timing, or lessons still unfinished. But there was another layer unfolding beneath it all. I was protecting you from isolation, from becoming strong in public while breaking in private, from achieving milestones that looked impressive but left you unsupported, unseen, and silently overwhelmed. You were never meant to carry what is coming by yourself, and if success had arrived too early, it would have demanded solitude instead of community. You were still learning how to ask for help without feeling weak. You were still learning how to receive support without guilt. You were still learning that strength does not mean self-sufficiency, it means discernment. I needed you to understand that carrying everything alone is not faith. It is fear disguised as responsibility. The waiting taught you to open your hands instead of clenching them. It taught you to invite others in rather than proving you could do it all. That lesson will save you later. Success without support creates pressure you were not designed to hold. It invites burnout, secrecy, and emotional distance. You would have felt obligated to maintain an image instead of living in truth. I would not allow you to confuse independence with maturity. So I delayed the outcome until you learned how to value connection over control, until you learned how to share the load without losing your sense of purpose, until you recognized that asking for help does not diminish your calling, it protects it. During the waiting, you learned who you could trust. You learned who listened without trying to fix you. You learned who could sit with uncertainty without projecting their fear onto you. Those relationships matter. They were being refined just as much as you were. I was aligning people who could walk with you without competing, who could support you without draining you, who could speak truth without trying to steer your path. If success had come earlier, you might have surrounded yourself with admiration instead of accountability. I spared you that mistake. You also learned how to rest, how to step back without feeling guilty, how to breathe without apologizing. These are not small skills, they are survival skills for the season ahead. Success increases demand. It amplifies expectations. Without rest and support, even good things become heavy. I was teaching you how to pace yourself, how to listen to your limits, how to honor your humanity. You are not meant to function as a machine. You are meant to thrive as a person. And now, when success comes, and it will, you will not carry it alone. You will recognize when to delegate, when to pause, when to lean on those who walk with you. You will no longer equate doing everything yourself with doing it well. That shift is protection. That is wisdom burned through waiting. And as we continue, remember this. The delay was not only about what you were becoming, it was about ensuring you would never have to become it by yourself. Every tear you tried to hide, every quiet breakdown you dismissed as weakness, every moment you thought was lost, none of it was wasted. You assumed those tears marked failure, exhaustion, or disappointment that needed to be overcome quickly. But tears are not evidence of defeat. They are evidence of investment. You cared. You opened. You stayed open when closing off would have been easier. And what is poured out with sincerity is never discarded, it is planted. Those tears carried honesty. They carried prayers you did not have words for. They carried surrender when answers were delayed. I received them all. Not as interruptions, not as inconveniences, but as offerings. They softened you. They kept your heart tender in a season that could have hardened you. They prevented bitterness from taking root. They became seeds of empathy, compassion, and understanding that will shape how you move forward. You cried because you were stretching beyond what felt comfortable. You cried because growth requires letting go. You cried because waiting exposed your vulnerability. But vulnerability is not something to outgrow, it is something to steward. It keeps you connected. It keeps you human. It keeps you aware of others' pain as well as your own. Without those tears, your strength would have become rigid. With them, your strength became flexible and alive. Those moments you thought were empty were actually fertile. You learned how to sit with emotion without running from it. You learned how to bring your whole self instead of presenting only what looked composed. That honesty deepened you. It prepared you to receive joy without suspicion and success without numbness. Many people achieve outward success, but lose their ability to feel deeply. You did not. Your tears protected your capacity to feel, and that capacity will make your future richer, not heavier. What you cried over will not define you, but it will inform you. It will shape how you respond to others' struggles. It will guide your sensitivity. It will remind you to move gently in spaces where others are still waiting. Seeds do not look like harvest when they are planted. They look like loss, like burial, like endings. But time transforms them. What felt buried will rise in ways you do not yet recognize. Soon, you will see fruit where you expected scars. Wisdom where you expected regret. Strength where you expected depletion. The tears that fell in silence will become understanding spoken with clarity. Comfort offered with authenticity. Support given without judgment. That is how nothing was wasted. And as this journey continues, carry this truth with you. What you poured out in pain was received, preserved, and transformed, and it will return to you as growth in the season ahead. Notice how differently you listen now, how your spirit pauses before agreeing, how your heart weighs before committing, how your mind no longer rushes to label every open door as destiny. The change did not happen overnight. It was carved into you by waiting. Time slowed you just enough to teach you the difference between noise and truth, between urgency and wisdom, between attraction and alignment. Discernment is not intuition alone, it is intuition trained by experience, refined by patience, and steadied by trust. You did not simply wait, you learned. Before this season, you moved quickly because speed felt like faith. You mistook momentum for meter. You trusted excitement more than clarity. And that is not failure, it is how many people begin. But the waiting rearranged your priorities. It taught you to observe patterns instead of reacting to moments. It taught you to ask better questions. Does this bring peace? Does this align with who I am becoming? Does this require compromise, or does it invite growth? These questions now rise naturally within you. As discernment at work, you learn to hear beyond words, a sense intention beneath tone, to recognize when something looks good but feels heavy. Waiting gave you time to notice how your body responds to truth versus pressure, how calm accompanies alignment, while restlessness follows misdirection. You stopped explaining away discomfort just to keep moving. You stopped overriding your inner signals to meet expectations. That awareness protects you. It keeps you from repeating old cycles under new names. Discernment also taught you restraint. You no longer feel the need to announce every plan or pursue every option. You understand that not everything needs your response, and not everyone deserves access. That quiet selectivity is not distance, it is wisdom. You learn that clarity grows in silence, not in constant input. So you created space. You listened more. You spoke less. And in that stillness, understanding deepened. You also learned to trust timing as a form of guidance. Instead of forcing outcomes, you began to watch how things unfolded. You noticed when effort felt strained versus when it felt steady. You recognized when alignment brought ease without complacency. This is not passivity, it is precision. Discernment moves with intention. It waits for the right moment, not the loudest invitation. Because of this, you are no longer easily swayed by comparison. Someone else's progress does not diminish your own. Someone else's approval does not validate your direction. You learn to stand in your own clarity without needing consensus. That independence is not isolation, it is alignment rooted in understanding. You trust your pace because you understand your path. The waiting sharpened you. It honed your perception. It trained you to recognize truth even when it arrives quietly. That skill will guide you through the next season, where opportunities increase and choices multiply. Without discernment, abundance becomes overwhelming. With it, abundance becomes purposeful. Remember this as we continue forward together. Waiting did not dull you, it refined you. And the clarity you carry now will keep you steady as movement accelerates. Take a moment and recognize the strength you once wished for. You are standing in it now. What used to flood your thoughts, drain your energy, and steal your sleep no longer has the same power over you. The situations that once overwhelmed you now meet a steadier version of you, one who breathes before reacting, who evaluates before deciding, who trusts before panicking. You did not become invincible, you became anchored. And that difference changes everything. There was a time when uncertainty felt unbearable, when waiting felt like failure, when pressure pushed you toward anxiety instead of insight. But the waiting taught you how to carry weight without collapsing. You learned how to hold questions without demanding immediate answers. You learned how to feel deeply without being ruled by emotion. That capacity did not appear suddenly, it was built through repetition, through endurance, through choosing steadiness when chaos tried to take the lead. You now understand your limits without being defined by them. You know when to pause and when to proceed. You know when to ask for help and when to sit quietly and listen. You no longer confuse urgency with importance. That awareness allows you to navigate complexity without losing your center. What once overwhelmed you did so because you were still learning how to stand. Now, you stand differently. You also learned how to recover. Setbacks no longer convince you that everything is undone. Delays no longer feel like dead ends. You have experienced enough waiting to know that movement can follow stillness, that clarity can follow confusion, that progress can emerge after patience. That knowledge steadies you. It keeps you from spiraling when plans shift. It keeps you grounded when expectations collide with reality. Handling more does not mean feeling less, it means being able to feel without breaking. You can hold responsibility and still rest. You can face challenge and still maintain peace. You can engage fully without losing yourself. That balance is not accidental. It is the fruit of the season you endured. You learned how to compartmentalize without disconnecting, how to prioritize without neglecting your inner life. Those skills will serve you well as demands increase. You might still encounter moments that stretch you, but you will not meet them as the person you once were. You will meet them with perspective, with patience, with discernment. You will recognize when something is temporary instead of catastrophic. You will remember that growth often feels uncomfortable before it feels empowering. And you will trust yourself to navigate what comes because you have already navigated so much. This is why the waiting mattered. It did not just delay what you wanted, it developed who you are. You are now capable of handling complexity with calm, responsibility with humility, and opportunity with wisdom. What once overwhelmed you no longer defines you. It prepared you. And as we move forward, carry this confidence with you, not arrogance, but assurance that you are ready to hold what is next without losing who you are. And now, proceed with the next 2 message points. Develop each message point into a single, well-developed paragraph of up to 500 words. Take extra care to strictly adhere to the word count. Each message must be no less than 500 words. Writing slightly more than 500 words is acceptable, but never below. Start each message with a powerful hook that immediately captures attention. The overall tone should sound as though you godlike roleplay-like theme, metaphorical, not literal, but it is understood to be a creative representation rather than a literal divine message. Or personally speaking and delivering these messages. Write in a you-focused, conversational style, directly addressing the listener as you, so it feels like a personal one-on-one conversation between you and the listener. Do not restart or conclude between messages. Instead, make each one feel like a continuation of the previous message, as if the conversation never paused. Ensure the overall flow remains deep, meaningful, and emotionally engaging, extending the message in a way that feels spiritually rich and connected. Also, give me message point no and the heading. Pay attention to the shift you can feel but cannot yet fully explain. This is not coincidence. It is convergence. What once resisted you is loosening. What once felt immovable is beginning to respond. The door is opening now, not because time finally ran out, but because alignment finally came together. You are standing at the intersection of readiness and opportunity, where preparation meets permission. Awaiting did not merely pass, it completed its work. And now, what was held back is being released with intention. You might be tempted to think something external suddenly changed, as if circumstances decided to cooperate at last. But the deeper truth is that you changed. You learned how to move without rushing, how to trust without grasping, how to listen without panicking. The door opens now because you no longer need it to validate you. You are not reaching for it from desperation. You are stepping toward it from stability. That difference matters. It changes how you enter and how you remain. Earlier, if the door had opened, you would have carried uncertainty through it. You would have questioned whether you belonged there. You would have tried to prove yourself instead of being yourself. And now, you enter with quiet confidence, not arrogance, not fear, but clarity. You know why you are there. You know what you bring. You know what you will not sacrifice to stay. The door is opening now because you can steward what follows without losing your center. You will notice that this opening does not arrive with chaos. It does not demand frantic decisions or rushed commitments. It unfolds steadily, inviting discernment rather than pressure. That is how you know it is aligned. You are not being pulled forward. You are being welcomed. You are not scrambling to catch up. You are arriving prepared. This is what readiness feels like, not urgency, but steadiness with momentum. What opens now also connects to others. The timing aligns conversations, resources, and opportunities that once felt scattered. Pieces begin to fit without forcing. You will recognize this ease not because it requires no effort, but because it does not drain you. Effort and peace coexist here. That balance is intentional. It is the reward of patience practiced, trust refined, and endurance proven. Do not be surprised if some things still feel unfamiliar. New doors always bring new rooms. But unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. You have learned how to navigate without needing certainty at every step. You have learned how to listen for guidance instead of reacting to noise. That is why this opening will not overwhelm you. You are stepping into it as someone who can adapt without losing direction. Remember this as you cross the threshold. The door is opening now because the work within you is complete enough to sustain what comes next. Completion does not mean perfection. It means preparedness. You are prepared to receive without clinging, to advance without forgetting, to grow without fracturing. The opening is not a finish line, it is a continuation. And you are ready to continue. Do not assume the waiting ends because faith is no longer needed. What is coming will draw from it deeply. Movement does not eliminate the need for trust. It changes how trust is exercised. The faith you built in stillness will now be used in motion. The patience you practiced in silence will now guide decisions made in real time. This next season will ask you to remember who you became while nothing was happening, because that person is exactly who can handle what begins to happen now. You learn to trust without timelines. That will matter when progress comes in stages rather than all at once. You learn to listen without constant confirmation. That will matter when voices multiply and opinions compete for your attention. You learn to remain grounded when outcomes were uncertain. That will matter when outcomes arrive with responsibility attached. Faith formed in waiting is durable. It does not panic when plans adjust. It does not collapse when expectations shift. It remains steady when the path bends. What is coming will invite you to act with courage, but not recklessness. To move decisively, but not impulsively. You will need the discernment you gain to recognize when to step forward and when to pause. Opportunities will appear that look similar on the surface, but lead in different directions. Faith will be the filter, not excitement, not fear, not pressure. You will rely on the inner steadiness you develop to choose alignment over applause. You may feel moments of uncertainty again, and that does not mean you are regressing. New levels bring new questions. The difference now is that questions no longer unseat you. You know how to carry them without losing your footing. You know how to wait within movement, to breathe within momentum. That is the faith waiting gave you, faith that functions even when life accelerates. There will also be moments when progress exposes vulnerability. Visibility often does. When that happens, remember how you learned to lean on presence rather than outcomes. Do not revert to proving yourself. Do not rush to secure what is already unfolding. Trust the process as you trusted the pause. Faith does not change forms, it changes contexts. The same trust that sustained you in quiet will guide you in activity. What is coming will also bless others through you. Influence expands when movement begins. The empathy you gain through tears will shape how you lead. The patience you practiced will inform how you support. The humility you learned will keep your strength accessible rather than intimidating. Faith built in waiting produces leadership that steadies others rather than overwhelms them. Carry this with you as you move forward. The waiting was not a detour from faith, it was faith's training ground. You are not starting over, you are building upon a foundation already laid. What comes next will draw from that foundation every day. And because you built it carefully, patiently, and honestly, it will hold. Let this truth reach the places in you that still ache. Nothing you endured was wasted, and nothing you invested was lost. You may still look back and feel the weight of time, the sting of missed opportunities, the quiet grief of moments you cannot reclaim. But loss is not measured the way you think it is. What looks like delay from one angle often reveals itself as depth from another. What felt like subtraction was often preservation. What seemed like wasted time was actually time redirected away from damage, toward development. You did not lose years. You gained wisdom that could only be learned slowly. You did not lose momentum. You gained stability that will outlast temporary success. You did not lose opportunities. You were spared entanglements that would have drained you long term. Even the things that truly ended, the relationships, the plans, the versions of yourself you had to release, none of them were erased without purpose. They taught you what to value, what to protect, and what to never again ignore. You learned what your limits feel like before crossing them dangerously. You learned what exhaustion sounds like before it demanded collapse. You learned what misalignment feels like before it became identity. These lessons are not losses, they are safeguards. They will keep you from repeating cycles that once cost you energy and peace. They will guide your decisions quietly, firmly, faithfully. Even joy was not lost, it was deferred and refined. You learned how to appreciate small moments while waiting for larger ones. You learned how to recognize peace even when progress was slow. That awareness will deepen your experience of what comes next. When fulfillment arrives, you will receive it with gratitude instead of entitlement, with presence instead of distraction. That makes it richer, not smaller. What you gave, your effort, your tears, your faithfulness was not consumed by the waiting. It was stored. It shaped your character and prepared your perspective. It built endurance that will carry you through seasons of abundance without losing balance. Nothing that forms you deeply is ever wasted. Even pain, when processed honestly, becomes a teacher rather than a scar. You will begin to notice how the pieces connect. How skills you developed quietly now serve you publicly. How resilience learned in silence now steadies you in motion. How compassion grown in waiting now flows naturally toward others. This is restoration, not always of the exact form you imagined, but of function, purpose, and strength beyond what you expected. Loss would have left you diminished. You are not diminished. You are expanded. What you carry now could not have been gained quickly. It required time, pressure, and patience. That is not loss, that is investment payoff. And as you continue forward, carry this assurance with you. Nothing you lived through was meaningless. It all converges here, strengthening you for what is unfolding now. This is the moment where clarity replaces confusion, not because everything is explained, but because everything finally makes sense. You have walked far enough to see the pattern. Not every detail, not every answer, but enough to understand that the waiting was not random. It was intentional. It was necessary. It was shaping you into someone who could receive without fear, move without panic, and grow without losing yourself. This is why you waited. Not because you were late, but because you were being readied. You are ready now because you no longer chase what validates you. You are ready because you can hold success without letting it define you. You are ready because you understand the cost of misalignment and choose peace over pressure. You are ready because you have learned how to wait within movement and trust within uncertainty. Readiness is not perfection, it is stability. And you are stable in ways you once were not. The version of you standing here does not crumble at delays or inflate at wins. You know how to remain centered. You know how to listen before acting. You know how to trust your discernment without dismissing humility. These qualities are not accidental, they were cultivated intentionally through every season you questioned. This is what readiness looks like: calm strength, grounded hope, and faith that does not need to prove itself. You are also ready because you understand that what comes next is not about arrival, it is about stewardship. Doors opening do not mark the end of growth. They mark the beginning of responsibility. And you are prepared to carry responsibility with grace. You know when to rest. You know when to ask for help. You know when to pause and when to move. That balance will sustain you far longer than enthusiasm ever could. This readiness does not mean you will never doubt again or never feel stretched. It means doubt will not derail you, and stretching will not break you. You have learned how to adapt without losing alignment, how to grow without forgetting who you are, how to receive without grasping. These are not traits developed quickly, they are earned through waiting. So when you step forward now, do not do it cautiously as if something might be taken away. Step forward confidently, knowing that what is unfolding aligns with who you have become. You are not walking into this unprepared. You are walking into it formed, refined, and steady. The waiting is not something you escaped, it is something you completed. This is why you've been waiting. And this quietly, clearly, undeniably is why you are ready now. Amen.